The Re-Empowerment of the States Amendment is a proposed amendment for the U.S. Constitution. This amendment would be ratified the same way that the other 27 amendments we currently have were ratified. That is, a positive vote of 2/3 of the U.S. House of Representatives, 2/3 of the United States Senate, and then ratification by 3/4 of the state legislatures. Upon ratification of this amendment, 2/3 or 34 state legislatures will have the power to repeal executive orders, rules, regulations, other regulatory actions, or administrative rulings issued by any department or agency of the federal government. The ratification of this amendment will provide a necessary check on the use of legislative and judicial power by the executive branch of the federal government. This added separation of powers will help restore balance between the state and federal governments and help provide better protection of civil liberties for all Americans.
When the founders were designing this system, they realized that if you consolidated power in one level, that was to the detriment of people. If you really care about people, care about having their voices heard, you care about having them have some control over their lives, you have to make sure that their power was diffused, not so that one person could dominate someone else. So that's why they came up with the concept of federalism, which was a balance. And if, as I believe, that balance has shifted slightly over the last several decades, what is important is to bring it back. And one of the ways to bring that back is to give states some specific powers that they can use to make sure that their voices will be heard on behalf of their constituents.
Federalism was around long before there were Democrats or Republicans or Federalists or Whigs or anything like that. So it's an attempt to really drive discussion between the states, among the states, with the federal government. And we're seeing more and more executive orders by a Republican or a Democratic president where they've played it cute to try to go around getting acceptance by the states. This really restores it back to where it should be, where you're having those conversations. Those conversations with the states, they're difficult, they're oftentimes maybe inconsistent, but that's democracy. And at the end of the day, you get a good product with it.
Part of why we're so excited about the Re-Empowerment of the States Amendment is it restores that federalism component to our nation. Even back to the beginning, the early battles of the revolution were all community-driven battles. It was getting people together at the local level. And when dollars and decisions, whether it's healthcare, immigration, or education, when those things are done locally rather than by some bureaucrat in Washington, we always get better solutions and we always get great long-term results for the country.
The states really were intended to have the power. The states were intended to have the power, not the federal government. And that states came together to give limited and enumerated power to the federal government. And we don't act like that anymore. I don't feel like as a state, we really enjoy the sovereignty that was intended. We have a federal government that over 200 years has encroached upon those rights, has limited the states. I sometimes like to play the game of trying to figure out, really, is there a right and an authority that a state purely enjoys that does not have some federal encroachment? Try to find that.
Increasingly, we're coming across well-meaning people, usually in Washington, D.C., they'll take a bill that's this size and issue regulations that are that size, but the impact upon the states is never really considered. And what this resolution does, it provides a vehicle inside the Constitution as the states to say, no, these agencies are having problems, we want to push back, we want to have that discussion with the federal government. It provides that vehicle that just isn't there right now because those agencies really are not listening to the states. They claim they are, but they're really not because they don't have incentive to.
The Re-Empowerment of the States Amendment is not a left issue or a right issue. It's not a Democrat or a Republican issue. It's not a liberal versus conservative issue. It is an American issue, and it's the American people who need to stand up. It's the American people that this amendment will re-empowerment, not just of the states, but of the people, to push back against a federal government that's too big, too intrusive, and way overbearing in our lives.
Under the structure of our Constitution, legislative power is separate from executive power. And so the power to pass law is separate from the power to enforce law. If you combine those two powers in the same entity, in the executive branch of government or in the same administrative agency, that's where you threaten the liberties of the people. Because then you open yourself to a tyrannical rule where you have the same people passing rules and enforcing rules, and they can very easily become unjust.
History is filled with examples of people coming to power, even some under very positive auspices or with great promises, only to find that centralization of power ends up undermining the civilization as a whole. America, from its founding, has been centered on power to the people, not to the people in Washington, not to the elected folks. And so every state should say, yeah, we do have the ability to push back against an overreaching federal government. As a state, we do have the ability to meet the needs of our people, especially the poor and the most vulnerable, better than anyone in Washington could. I think every state believes they can do it better than Washington. Re-empowerment of the state amendment simply ensures that they will have that power for years to come.
Our Constitution really holds us up as a light to the world, and we can demonstrate to the rest of the world that dominant, powerful governments will not produce a free and prosperous people. Only the Constitution, like we have in this country, will provide that freedom and prosperity that people around the world seek. We are leaders in liberty and freedom. And that's what we're trying to restore in this country. The balance of power that will protect individual liberties and give Americans the right to prosper and grow in an atmosphere of freedom.
If you empower states to have another voice in there, you're not taking power away from the federal government. You're simply modifying it so that they will make sure that they're hearing the desperate voices that are out there. And giving people a chance to be heard is what will make this a better country. And right now, more than ever, we need to make sure that people's voices are heard in a very calm and rational and serious way. And that's what this amendment tries to do.